In every love story, there's a truth no one dares to tell. Welcome to Burned by Love. My name is Elena Moore, and I've always been good at keeping things neat. My kitchen, my schedule, my secrets. On the surface, I was just another woman living in a small coastal town, tucked away on Willow Lane, where every mailbox looked the same, and every neighbor waved with a smile that never quite reached their eyes. My days were filled with routines. I taught literature at the local high school, walked my dog at 7 a.m. sharp, and spent weekends tending to the small garden behind my house. No one ever asked questions, and I never gave them a reason to. The house I lived in wasn't mine. I inherited it 5 years ago from a woman whose name no one remembered and whose face never hung on any of the faded walls. The deed had my name on it now, but it never truly felt like home. It creaked at night in strange patterns, and the attic was always inexplicably colder than the rest of the house. I told myself it was just poor insulation, though I never dared to go up there after sunset. Beneath the floorboard in the master bedroom, there was a box, an old one, rusted at the edges and covered in layers of dust no amount of cleaning could entirely remove. Inside were black and white photos of a child I didn't recognize, old letters with no return address, and a key I hadn't yet found the lock for. Sometimes I'd sit with that box for hours, holding the photos like they might whisper their secrets if I was quiet enough. There were nights when I'd hear a knock at the door after midnight, always soft, never forceful. By the time I looked out the window, no one would be there. I started keeping the lights off, pretending I wasn't home, heart pounding while I clutched the curtain edge with white knuckles. I didn't tell anyone. Why would I? In this town, everyone had ghosts. Mine just happened to be a little louder than most. 2 weeks ago, a new neighbor moved in next door, a young woman named Sophie. Friendly, curious, too curious. She had the kind of open smile that made people want to trust her. She baked muffins on her second day and asked me if the house ever felt strange. I laughed it off, told her it was just old bones settling, but something flickered in her eyes, like she knew I was lying. That weekend, Sophie knocked on my door at dusk. Her expression was different, serious, almost frightened. She asked if she could borrow a flashlight. I handed it over, more out of reflex than kindness. "You ever go into your attic?" she asked, pausing at the doorway. I smiled tightly. "Not often." "Mine has a hatch too, same layout. It was open when I moved in." She left without saying anything else. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed listening to the wind, wondering if Sophie had seen something she didn't know how to explain, or worse, something she did understand and didn't want to admit. The next morning, the flashlight was placed neatly at my front door. I never heard her return it. There was a note tucked underneath. "You should go up there before someone else does." I crumpled the paper, threw it away, and tried to pretend my hands weren't shaking. I didn't sleep that night either. The days passed with a strange stillness. The town was quiet, almost too quiet. Every morning, I woke to the sound of leaves brushing against the old windows of my aunt's home. I'd lie there for minutes, staring at the ceiling, listening to the low creaks of the wooden beams above. It felt like the house was breathing. My aunt's absence lingered like perfume in the air, present but fading. The bedroom she left behind still had her books, her embroidery supplies, and a wardrobe full of clothes I hadn't dared to touch. I told myself I'd go through it eventually, donate what I could. But something about it felt sacred, like stepping into her room uninvited would disturb something more than just dust. I started noticing things. The faucet in the guest bathroom turned itself on one night, just a trickle, but enough to wake me. The kitchen lights flickered every time I passed under them. And twice now, I found the back door unlocked, even though I was certain I had bolted it the night before. At first, I brushed it off as forgetfulness. A new environment, the stress of grief, an old house, my mind was probably playing tricks. But by the third week, I wasn't so sure anymore. One afternoon, while sorting through her bookshelves, I came across a small, leather-bound journal. It wasn't like her usual reading. This one had no title, no author name, just a sun symbol drawn into the cover, faded and almost rubbed away. I flipped it open, expecting to find some strange novel or maybe her notes, but instead, the pages were filled with delicate handwriting. It wasn't hers. It started with what looked like diary entries, short lines about the house, someone being watched, the word basement appearing over and over. I kept reading, and the entries turned more frantic. Whoever wrote it had been hearing things in the walls, seeing shadows move behind mirrors, waking up with scratches that hadn't been there the night before. I closed the journal quickly. My palms were sweating. That night, I dreamed I was standing in front of the basement door. It was slightly open, a cold draft crawling up the stairs and brushing against my skin. I stepped closer, and something deep in the dark whispered my name. I woke up gasping, my sheets tangled around my legs. The house was quiet again, but I didn't feel alone. I tried to distract myself during the day. I went to the town market, tried a new cafe, walked by the lake where my aunt used to take me as a child. Locals recognized me, even if I barely remembered them. Most offered kind condolences, but some looked at me longer than necessary, like they were holding back something. One woman, an old florist with trembling hands, asked how the house felt at night. When I said it was quiet, she just nodded slowly and said, "For now," before turning away. By the fourth week, the journal started haunting me. I left it tucked away in the living room drawer, but I kept thinking about it. Who had written it? Was it someone who lived in this house before us? Or was it just some piece of fiction my aunt picked up at a flea market? Still, something felt too personal about the entries, too raw. There were references to rooms I recognized, places in the house no outsider would know. Then, one afternoon, while cleaning out the attic, I found something else. Behind a stack of old suitcases was a wooden crate. Inside were several black and white photographs, none labeled, none framed. But in each of them, the house was clearly visible. In one photo, a young girl stood by the front steps. In another, a man I didn't recognize was sitting in what was now the living room, staring directly into the camera with eyes that looked wrong. And then there was a photo of the basement door, closed, a smear of something dark around the frame. I set the pictures down, heart pounding. A breeze passed through the attic, and I swore I heard footsteps creak along the floor behind me. When I turned, no one was there. Something was wrong with this house, something deep and hidden, buried beneath wallpaper and old memories. And though I tried to rationalize it, a part of me was already certain. Whatever had happened here wasn't finished. And now, it was starting again. I stood in front of the basement door for the first time since I arrived. It wasn't locked, but it felt sealed, like the wood itself didn't want to be touched. For weeks, I'd avoided it, pretending I had no reason to go down there. The truth was, I was scared. Of what? I didn't know. There had been no sounds, no lights flickering around it, but its silence felt unnatural, calculated. I didn't open it, not yet. I turned around and told myself I'd just make some tea. But even in the kitchen, I could feel its weight behind me, pressing on my spine like a memory I wasn't ready to revisit. That night, I couldn't sleep. It wasn't the wind. It wasn't the creaks or the distant thudding pipes. It was something subtler, something inside me, like a hand reaching through my chest, pulling at a thread I didn't know was loose. I got up at 2:47 a.m. The hallway was dim. The air smelled like wet stone and rusted metal. I padded silently to the living room, drawn by a feeling I didn't understand. That's when I heard it. A voice. Soft, faint, like a child singing under their breath from behind a door. I froze. My breath caught. The sound came from the basement. I stepped closer. My bare feet touched the edge of the cold tile near the door. The singing stopped. Then came a knock, 3 sharp taps from the other side. I ran back to my room and didn't sleep for the rest of the night. The next morning, I told myself it was a dream, sleep deprivation. Maybe the wind had knocked something against the wall downstairs. Maybe I had imagined the voice. But deep down, I knew better. That afternoon, I went to town and visited the local archive. The clerk remembered my aunt, which surprised me. "She came here a lot," he said. "Asked about the house's history, mostly. Never told you?" I shook my head. "No, she never really talked about it." He gave me an odd look, then handed me a box of old newspaper clippings. "She said the place used to belong to the Solberg family, back in the 50s. Tragic story, really. They had a daughter that vanished, never found." I scanned the articles. There it was. June 12, 1957. Missing girl. Last seen near the cellar steps. A cold chill crawled up my arms. The article included a photo of the girl, 7 years old, dark curls, a small dimple on her right cheek. My stomach dropped. It was the same child from one of the attic photos. I left the archive without saying much. My hands trembled the whole walk home. That evening, I stared at the basement door again. I couldn't ignore it anymore. If there were answers, they were down there. With a flashlight in one hand and trembling fingers on the doorknob, I opened the door. It creaked, of course it did, and the smell that rose up was thick, earthy, metallic. I stepped onto the wooden stairs, every board groaning under my weight. The beam of my flashlight cut through the darkness, illuminating shelves full of old cans, tools, and cobwebs. I exhaled. Nothing unusual, just a basement. But when I turned toward the back wall, I noticed something strange. A section of the wall looked newer, slightly cleaner bricks, more symmetrical lines, almost like someone had rebuilt that part more recently. I stepped closer. That's when I saw the markings, etched into the lower brick, barely visible. A sun symbol. The same one from the journal. I knelt down, running my fingers along the cold stone. And then I heard it, just behind the wall. A scratching sound. I stumbled back, the flashlight flickering. Then a whisper. "Help me." I dropped the flashlight. It rolled across the floor, casting chaotic shadows on the walls. I couldn't move. My breath was stuck in my throat. The whisper came again, clearer this time. "Please, let me out." A girl's voice. I backed up the stairs, each step heavier than the last, like the house was trying to pull me back in. I slammed the door and locked it, even though I knew a lock wouldn't stop whatever was down there. All night, I sat in the living room, knees hugged to my chest, the journal open beside me. There were entries I hadn't noticed before, ones I swear weren't there just days ago. One in particular made my skin crawl. "She hears me now, finally, but I'm not the only one down here." The morning sun filtered through the dusty curtains, but it brought no comfort. I hadn't slept. I hadn't even moved from the living room couch. The journal lay open beside me, mocking me with its impossible message. "She hears me now, finally, but I'm not the only one down here." What did that mean? Was the voice I'd heard really the missing girl? If so, then who else was down there? Every instinct in me screamed to leave the house, pack my bags, drive away, never look back. But something deeper held me in place. Guilt? Curiosity? Or maybe I just needed to know the truth. I spent the next few hours flipping through every page of the journal again, this time carefully. Hidden between some of the older entries, I found more symbols like the one on the basement wall, little suns and crescent moons, sometimes paired with names. One symbol repeated often, a jagged spiral with a line through it. That one felt wrong. My fingers hovered over it each time, as if touching it would infect me somehow. These weren't just drawings, they were warnings. That night, I returned to the basement. Armed with a crowbar, 2 flashlights, and a voice recorder I'd found in my aunt's office, I descended slowly into the dark. The air was colder than before, heavier, as if something was waiting. I made my way to the back wall, the one with the sun symbol. My hands shook as I pressed against the bricks, trying to find a hollow spot. It took me 10 minutes, but eventually, I found a loose edge. With a deep breath, I jammed the crowbar between the bricks and pulled. Dust exploded into the air. The brick shifted. One by one, I removed the bricks until a narrow crawlspace was revealed behind the wall. My flashlight trembled in my hand as I leaned forward and shined it inside. At first, it was just darkness, but then a flicker of something. Hair. A child's face. She looked right at me and smiled. I stumbled back, heart racing. The girl didn't move, didn't blink, just smiled. Her lips moved, and though I couldn't hear her, I knew what she was saying. "You found me." Then I realized her mouth wasn't moving anymore, but another voice was speaking, behind me. A man's voice. "She never left," it whispered. I spun around, flashlight beams slicing through the cold air, but there was no one there. I turned back to the crosslace. The girl was gone. Panic gripped me. My breath came fast, my skin prickled. And then, a hand reached out from the wall. It grabbed my wrist. I screamed, wrenching myself free, stumbling backward onto the concrete floor. The flashlight clattered beside me and died. Darkness swallowed everything. I scrambled, heart hammering, until I found the second flashlight and clicked it on. The wall was closed. No opening, no crawlspace, just brick, as if it had never been disturbed. I staggered up the stairs, gasping for breath. When I reached the top, I didn't bother closing the basement door. I collapsed against the wall in the hallway, heart racing, limbs trembling. What the hell had I just seen? I ran to the journal and flipped to the last page. There was a new entry, written in a different handwriting than the rest. "He lives in the walls. He feeds on secrets. I set the girl free, but he saw me. He always sees." My hands went cold. This wasn't just about a missing girl. Someone, or something, was feeding off the hidden pain in this house. I rushed to the attic. The box of photographs was still there. I flicked through them, and that's when I noticed something horrifying. In the background of every photo, the same man. Sometimes just a shadow, sometimes reflected in a mirror. Always watching, always there. My aunt knew. That's why she left the journal. That's why she never stayed more than a few days at a time. And now I had awakened whatever she had locked away. I left the house that night. No packing, no shoes, just me, my car keys, and the overwhelming sense that I wasn't supposed to survive if I stayed. I drove aimlessly for hours, only stopping when exhaustion forced me to pull over at a gas station miles away. I sat in the lot until the sun rose, replaying every chilling moment in my mind, especially the hand, the crawl space, the girl's face, the new handwriting in the journal, the man in every photo. When I finally dared to call someone, I chose Detective Harris. He was the same officer who had interviewed me after Aunt Margaret's funeral. He hadn't seemed overly kind, but he was thorough, logical. I told him everything. Well, most of it. Enough to make him drive out and meet me at the diner near the county line. He listened with narrowed eyes, occasionally jotting things down. Then he said something I didn't expect. "You're not the first one to say that house watches people." My breath caught. "What do you mean?" He leaned forward. "There have been stories, nothing confirmed. A couple who went missing in the 80s, last seen near that property. A mailman who reported strange figures in the windows. The records go back decades, but nobody could prove anything." He paused. "But you saw something, didn't you?" I nodded, unsure how to explain it without sounding insane. He promised to check the house himself, said he'd take a partner, maybe a forensic specialist. I didn't go back with him. I couldn't. I stayed in a motel that night, barely sleeping, but feeling safer than I had in weeks. The next morning, I called the station. Detective Harris was in the hospital. They had found him unconscious in the basement of my aunt's house. He had suffered a seizure despite no known medical history. His partner, Officer Lyman, was found upstairs, curled in a fetal position, whispering the same phrase over and over. "He lives in the walls. He lives in the walls." They found no sign of forced entry, no crawl space, no journal, no girl. It was as if the house had erased everything. I almost laughed. Of course it had. That's what it did. It swallowed secrets, twisted them, and used them against you. But it wasn't over. That night, I woke in the motel to the sound of knocking. 3 gentle taps on the wall beside my bed. Then silence. I held my breath. Then scratch, 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 as if nails were dragging across the inside of the wall. I turned on every light, moved furniture, checked the hallway. Nothing. But on the motel room mirror, written in a thin smear of condensation that hadn't been there a second before, were 4 words. "You brought him here." I screamed. I left the motel before sunrise and drove straight to the edge of the county. I didn't stop until I crossed the state line. I knew the truth now. It wasn't the house. It was him. The man from the photos, the shadow in the corners, the thing my aunt tried to contain with journals and symbols and hidden doors. He wasn't a ghost. He was something older, something hungry, and I had set him free. I don't know how long I can keep running, but I have to try, because every time I stop, I hear him, breathing, whispering, and worse, sometimes I feel him smiling behind me. Sometimes the scariest secrets aren't the ones whispered behind closed doors. They're the ones buried deep inside us, shoved so far down we pretend they never existed. For Elena, coming home meant unlocking the past she had desperately tried to forget. But secrets don't stay buried forever. This story reminds us that trauma has a way of following us, no matter how far we run or how tightly we try to seal the cracks. Healing isn't about forgetting, it's about facing the truth, no matter how dark, and finding strength in the pain. Maybe you felt like Elena before, trapped by memories you wish you could erase. But even in the darkest places, there's always a flicker of light if we're brave enough to face the shadows. If this story made your heart race, your mind spiral, or your gut twist, leave a comment below. Tell us, have you ever felt like a house held more than just memories? We'd love to hear your thoughts, theories, and even your own stories. And don't forget, if you enjoyed this video, tap the like button, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell. We post a new twisted tale of love, betrayal, and hidden truths every few days. You won't want to miss what's coming next. Until then, be careful who you trust. Even love can leave scars.